Something I gotta say before we get into the video. Obviously last night Kevin Durant suffered a potentially career-altering injury. We're all still waiting on the MRI, and prayers go up for KD and a hopefully speedy recovery. Now Kevin is one of my favorite players in the league, and regardless of whether you love him or hate him, we should all be behind him right now. This is bigger than sports. This video, however, in context, but all things considered, may come across as a little bit harsh in regards to KD. It was written prior to Game 5, but it is still the reality of the situation in Golden State leading up to that point, regardless of this injury. So do keep that in mind, and please reserve judgment for the end of the video, because you'll hear a different tone and have a completely different understanding of the point I'm trying to make once you've watched the whole thing. Alright then, let's get into it. So take yourself back to late November of 2018, and this time, look at it through the lens of that bigger picture, of that full scope. With such a tightly knit group who'd managed to keep their egos in check via the strength in numbers mentality, amidst all the chaos of integrating more and more star power to the group, it's gotta make you feel some type of way when you start to see that charade of selflessness and camaraderie begin to slip, getting chipped away at every season with every new addition and every correlating departure. And no, that hasn't dissipated. Not 100%. You can't erase history. Don't let the buddy-buddy nature of this team fool you. Don't let this become another forgotten narrative. It's not a trend or a phase or a headline. It's a deep-seated issue.
And then I heard you tell Kevin Durant he can have whatever contract he wants next year.
Yeah, that was just for the media. He can't have anything like that at all.
Mid-level.
Yeah, mid-level, behind closed doors.
Because I think last year he told Steph he could have any contract he wants too.
Yeah,
so
well, yeah, that was different. He's been here from the run, the way before days. He's earned it.
and there ended the Warriors' cohesion right there.
The inescapable reality is that KD will always be an outsider to this group. Nothing that he does in an effort to integrate himself will ever be enough to erase that ever-residing elephant in the room. You did not have what it took to beat us in a 7-game series, and then turned around and became a part of what we were building here instead. You could blame it on the system in Oklahoma City. You could blame it on the dynamic between you and Russell Westbrook. You could prove time and time again that you're the most talented player in Golden State, but nothing will change that reality. In fact, the level of greatness you possess is what creates most, if not all, of the complications. It's different when you're a bench piece or a complimentary role player that's had to struggle with their own version of adversity being brought into the organization. Be it a JaVale McGee and the reputation he built for himself, or Shaun Livingston in a near career-ending injury, or even someone who's held that same superstar status in DeMarcus Cousins, but who also had his own near career death experience, as well as the less than ideal situation he was drafted into in Sacramento. It's much easier to come into a team culture that represents a brotherhood and simply fall into the system, reaping the benefits of the strength in numbers culture as well as the supreme talent all around you in order to elevate your efficiency, becoming one component in a larger machine, devoting yourself to something bigger than you individually. But when you're already as accomplished as KD prior to joining the team, someone who could come into the system and immediately establish himself as one of, if not the best players on the entire roster, Draymond said it best. They didn't bring him there to fit in. They brought him there to stand out. It's not about your teammates' attitudes towards you. It's about your internal sense of identity. Golden State's core can be as accepting and welcoming of KD as they possibly could be, which they have been from the start. Steph Curry can be as willing to share the spotlight as he possibly could be, to set aside his own ego, his own need for individual recognition, which he has done. But that reality will still exist. At the end of the day, someone feels like an outsider, not always because they've been actively shunned from whatever entity, but because they themselves are actively distancing themselves from the rest. A mental block prohibiting them from fully integrating into the group, compounded by the fact that there's nothing that could be done that removes Steph Curry as the one true face of this franchise, or the group of Steph, Klay, Draymond, and then Iguodala and Kerr as the true OGs of this dynasty, the founders. KD was welcomed with open arms, but this is their team.
Here's how KD changes it. I do believe KD can change the narrative, and here's why. Sacrifice. Sacrifice. I will do what it takes for this team to be great for the long period of time. Because you know what KD can be then? The leader. Not the guy who just joined the super team, but the guy who became the leader of the super team. He's already the best player. And if in 5 years I look back on this and go, you know what? KD didn't just join that team. He made it his
That's
team.
true.
That changed that.
This was a narrative that made sense to me at the time, but now I realize that it has no place in reality. Doesn't matter how many times he's awarded Finals MVP, it doesn't matter how many times he puts the team on his back and carries them to victory while outshining Steph. It doesn't matter how many times he's crowned as the best player on the planet. Golden State will never be his team.
I'm going to stand in front of KD before his Warrior exit. I want to enjoy as much time with him as possible. Steph, we'll smooth Bob over later on. Any contract you want, Kev, I promise.
This type of dynamic has created a sort of corruption of the core fundamentals of this team, the very values it was built upon. Maybe not as dramatic as those talking heads in the media made it out to be at the start of the season. It's much more subtle, but it's there. When KD is on the floor, for whatever reason, you can actually sense that everything just comes a lot more naturally to this team, despite the fact that things don't come nearly as easy. They're more of a singular unit, coming together as one. They're 1,000 times more of what made them what they are in the first place. Now with KD having missed chunks of the past 3 rounds of the postseason, all the way up to now Game 5 of the NBA Finals themselves, the Warriors once again bear semblance to their Cinderella story roots. They truly look like that team again, that close-knit brotherhood in the true sense of the word, despite the fact that they're down big in the series, facing a 3-1 deficit with their backs against the wall. Even recent quotes and comments parallel the exact vibes of this team's origins.
Whatever it takes to protect the legacy. All for it. That's really the only reason why I like football basketball.
This unfortunate position they currently stand at may have, in fact, actually reignited and re-inspired Golden State with a fresh sense of purpose and a newfound identity. The identity that all of this was built from. The identity that all of their careers were built through. The identity of an underdog. Kevon Looney said after the Game 4 loss, Draymond gave a great speech. Stay confident, know who we are. We didn't get here by quitting and pouting or giving up. We always believe. We got a bunch of guys who have been underdogs and who have been counted out before. Looney then continued on to say, I think we're going to embrace this challenge even more. Everybody thinks we're going to lose now, and being the underdog again, like we haven't been in a long time, is fun. This is who this team truly is at their core. But they'd lost sense of that through so much success. They'd lost their own identity. They'd become jaded, cocky, arrogant. And how could you really blame them? First coming out of nowhere and taking down the almighty King James, to surpassing the greatest win record in history the season after, all while breaking another couple dozen records or so along the way. The one wake-up call they had came in 2016, and it was a necessary one, but also one that only lasted a couple weeks before one of the greatest players in the world decided to come and join you. And we're back to that sense of invincibility, of immortality. Imagine trying to tell the Warriors anything amidst all that. Imagine trying to instill any sort of awareness within the team throughout that 5-year stretch. It's impossible. The only title that they lost, they had a 3-1 lead to begin with. Suffered injuries, suffered suspensions, and Murphy's Law hit from every angle. Everything that could go wrong, did go wrong. Then they turned around and added KD. These 2019 finals, they have finally been hit with that overdue harsh taste of reality. A truly humbling experience. The uncertainty of the looming free agency period, along with the state they currently stand at, facing elimination, needing to work out a miracle to somehow escape that almost inevitable fate, along with the chemistry issues faced along the way, has truly been a tough testing season, and this is the final test, and it's brought them closer than ever before. But this attitude has remained regardless of where they stood, whether they're in the midst of completing a sweep in the conference finals or facing elimination on the very final stage. making them A more likable group in general, and B, again stirring up conversations, a debate within media and fan circles about whether or not Kevin Durant actually makes them worse, about whether the Warriors without him play a more enjoyable brand of basketball to watch. These were the conversations being had last round. Then shifting back into the conversations we hear now, that they do need him, they desperately need him. And Draymond has again went from crucial piece and heart and soul of the team to disposable piece, if that means keeping KD. Which relates back to my point on the psychological effect these kinds of discussions can have on players and teams as a whole. When these narratives are constantly being shoved down our throats, the players catch wind of them too, obviously. These narratives could have no basis in reality whatsoever and still plant a seed in one's mind. When you're constantly being exposed to certain ideas, your brain can naturally instill some of these notions and bury them deep within your mind. Whether you wholeheartedly disagree with them or not, whether you put as much energy into disregarding and denying said notions as you possibly could, they can still come back to life at any moment, creating paranoia and a deep-rooted sense of distrust between teammates. And the issue is, these narratives do have a basis in reality. Draymond really did say certain things to KD. He really did feel certain ways about his inability to ever commit long-term to the organization. About the fact that he's done this before without him, that he doesn't need him to win a championship, that they don't need him to win a championship. And he voiced those thoughts to him openly, further instilling that deeper sense in KD's mind that he's an outsider to this organization. Embedding it deeper within. Notice how quickly he takes offense to the phrasing of this question.
You thought about their play. How have you thought about their play? Our play? Yeah. Sorry about that.
None of this is to say that KD is a bad teammate or a selfish one, or that he hasn't formed tight bonds with other members of the team. Him and Quinn Cook, for example, grew up together. They've known each other since they were kids. The primary takeaway of all this is that KD did not come up out the trenches with this group. He was not overlooked. He was not doubted as an NBA prospect coming into the league. And then as a collective team later on when they were first beginning to make some real noise in this league, making it through those hardships and building themselves up to what they are now together. It's what truly solidified those bonds within that core, and nothing KD can ever do will erase that fact that he wasn't there for that experience, that he just joined the team after the fact and came along for the ride. Or is there? Perhaps there is something he could do. Again, Golden State is now back in those same trenches, back to those Cinderella story roots, true underdogs again. Everyone in the entire world is a disbeliever, it seems. Initially, I thought, if KD were to come back Game 5, and if the Warriors were able to pull together, rally around each other, Kevin Durant included, and somehow battle back from 3-1 and still accomplish this three-peat, that could essentially be what finally solidifies KD as one of the rest, officially, no longer trapped in this role as an outsider, a reject from the rest of the league and a misfit even in Golden State. But now, after the events that transpired last night, that display that KD put on, that demonstration of his true intent, putting the greater good of this dynasty's success above his own personal long-term sustained health, risking the final years of his career, risking millions of dollars on the free agent market this offseason. All just to stand in solidarity with the team facing perhaps their toughest obstacle throughout this entire 5-year span. That event, in and of itself, may have been more than enough. Should have been more than enough. What more can one do than that? What more could he sacrifice? What more could he put on the line to give his teammates a chance to prosper? Kevin Durant is no longer an outsider, in my eyes. It's no longer Golden State and KD. It's just Golden State, one entity. The only issue is, even if that all were to happen, even if this one display of brotherhood were enough, it may be too little too late. Obviously, the severity of this injury could change this, but Kevin Durant may be out the door regardless, leaving in search of a new image. As soon as he'd finally accomplished perhaps the true primary reason he'd come to Golden State in the first place, finding a brotherhood that feeds off each other, grows as one, sets aside egos for one another, sacrifices for one another, and accomplishes greatness together as a unit. If you call Kevin sensitive, if you say he cares too much about what people think of him, you can't then turn around and follow that up with the statement that KD is this supervillain-esque character that joined Golden State only to shit on the rest of the league and be so incredibly dominant that no one could possibly compete. Those two statements contradict each other. If you pay attention to what KD has shown us over the years, this is all he truly wanted to find in Golden State. Sure, he wanted to win. Who doesn't? But I think what really attracted him to Golden State specifically was this culture. A culture that has been rapidly slipping from their grasp over the past couple seasons. But now, whether they win or lose, Golden State will once again truly be a brotherhood and a more closely knit group than ever before. But we'll discuss all that in more detail in the next video. So stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications for more videos where journalism meets storytelling. And follow me on Instagram and Twitter for all things KlayAllen. And I'll see y'all soon. Peace.
Last year he told Steph he could have any contract he wants too, so.
Well, yeah, that was different. He's been here from the run, the way before days. He's earned it.
Kevin had it's an Achilles injury. I don't believe there's anybody to blame, but I understand this world, and if you have to, you can blame me. I run our basketball operations department, and let me tell you something about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant loves to play basketball, and the people that questioned whether he wanted to get back to this team were wrong. And I'm not here to... He's one of the most misunderstood people. He's a good teammate. He's a good person. It's not fair.
With all due respect, what's your reasoning to say, to point the finger at you?
I am the president of basketball.